Hey y'all, welcome to part 2 of the 68 RFE rebuild. This video is going to be dedicated to the front drum complex. So that's going to be your input housing, and this is quite a complex assembly, relatively speaking, at least insofar as all the transmissions that I build. And so I wanted to dedicate one video entirely to just this assembly. So like I said, a lot going on. You have a total of 8 snap rings in this entire assembly. 5 bearings, 4 hubs, 4 O-rings, 3 clutch packs, and along with 3 pressure plates, 2 bonded pistons, 2 sealing rings, 1 selective washer, and 1 flat steel, 1 input shaft, a drain back capsule, and a partridge in a pear tree. And that last is not available on all models. So, like I said, a lot going on. We're going to install the Transgo hot forged pressure plate that allows us to squeeze in an extra interior and exterior overdrive clutch disc into that pack. That by itself is not going to bulletproof it. I mean, you know, there's a myriad of reasons and drivers behind why the overdrive clutch fails in these units so often, but what it does do is give it a little bit more, holding capacity or strength. So anytime you can beef up an area of vulnerability in a transmission, you always want to do it, provided the cost benefit is there, and it is with this. So I'm going to go ahead and get everything unwrapped. We need to get the bearings soaked in ATF +4. We'll go ahead and remove the pressure plate from the Transgo box, and then we have our paper rubber kit, because there's a good number of those items that go into this whole deal. So let me reposition the camera and we'll get started. All right, let's start unwrapping stuff. So we begin with the Transgo pressure plate. So you guys have not seen these before. If you haven't, I'm sure you're curious to see what it looks like. And of course, plastic wants to fight me. Why? Because I'm filming. If I wasn't, well, you know how it goes. You know the old excuse. If I wasn't filming, it'd be a lot smoother looking. I wouldn't be so clumsy. Alright, so Transgo will give you some instructions in kind of a cross-section of the entire assembly, including all the clutch packs, location of snap rings, dimensions, and things of that nature. Very useful information. I find that Transgo, with their instructions, and they make these freely available online, even if you don't buy their products, are a great resource for anyone building transmissions, whether you're just doing your first one or you've been doing it for the last 100 years or so. Which on the internet, everybody that I seem to come in contact with, at least other builders, a lot of them have been building transmissions for literally 100 years. And they've done millions and millions, and of course I've done none and don't know anything. Anyway, rant over. We'll go ahead and compare the 2 plates. This is the factory overdrive plate with the Transgo plate. As you can see, it's got a lot of cosmoline or grease, packing grease, so we'll need to clean that off. But it's not as obvious by eye, but this is a little bit thinner. And you see the recess here when you look at it from this face, this elevation. So clearly material has been taken off to allow you to squeeze in that extra friction and interior exterior friction. I was going to say friction and steel. Alright, we'll keep that other pressure plate aside in case we need to put clutches on it or something. But this is what we're going to be using, so I'm going to clean this off before we do anything with it. Get this out of the way. Alright, so let's go ahead and dig into our seal gasket kit. Identify what we need from here. Let's get this cardboard out of the way. Alright, so here are going to be your 2 lip seals. One goes into the clutch housing, one goes into the OD&D apply piston. So overdrive, underdrive. And it looks like they are kind of bonded together here. They're both exactly the same, so it doesn't matter, you know, which one goes where. Actually, I apologize. Goes into the hub, not the clutch housing. So is your main input hub, and here's the old lip seal, and the lip faces down into the hub. And then for your apply piston, here is the lip seal, and again the lip faces down. Alright, we got our two O-rings. These are Christmas O-rings, so red and green. And you can see on the hub where they go. Here's your green hub, or green hub. Here's your green ring, and here's your red ring. I'm batting 1,000 today with my verbal presentation. So here's your two sealing rings. They're scarf cut, no special tools required. Those are for your input shaft. So you want to make sure that the sealing rings are going to fit cleanly into the groove. So, you know, just run them along, just like this. All right, you know, just a simple check you could do, you know, just to make sure everything fits. And you got an O-ring. This is going to be for that little drain back capsule. And that goes at the base of the input shaft. We have our new bleeder orifice filter. So I'm going to punch the old one out, put a new one in, and that goes here in the drum. Alright, what you have to do is punch this out, put the new one in, and restake it. Alright, these can get clogged, and when they do, you're going to have a buildup of fluid in, you know, in the apply surface or the apply cavity of that piston, and that will cause the overdrive clutch to drag when it's not, you know, being worked, when it's not being commanded on. And that, of course, leads to premature burnup and failure. Alright, you have a large O-ring here. Which is currently being hung up by sealing rings for the stator. Those are end up going to be extra. And that's where this O-ring goes, right in here. Alright, I believe that's everything out of this kit for this drum. Or this assembly, rather. The rest of this can go on the other bench. So here is our underdrive return spring assembly. So here's the part number. If you need it, like I said, this all comes in the dealership deluxe kit. So if you watch part 1, I cover everything that goes into that kit, or comes with it rather. And that's the kit that I use for these transmissions. That's what I would recommend you use. I mean, unless you have another preferred kit or like a high performance kit, you know, there's a lot of different options available in the market. I mean, you know, whatever it is you're working on and the application, build strategy, power requirements, you know. So Sonics has this bearing kit. So in this package, you're going to have all 5 bearings that go, actually 4 of the 5 bearings that go into this assembly here. And the rest of this is for the rest of the transmission. Like these are gear train bearings, gear train bearing. And then this bearing is going to go here, and it's going to link in or connect in with the selective spacer washer. So you notice you have tabs. You can see that, yeah, right there. There's a locking tab. So this bearing will seat into this side of the selective. All right, when your bonded pistons come out of the box, you'll notice they'll have packing grease, so the packing grease has to be cleaned off. You want to just double check. This one usually doesn't have it. It's the apply piston for the underdrive clutch that has all the cosmoline typically. All right, let me get bearings soaking, parts cleaned off, and then we will start the build up. All right, the first order of business is to R&R that little bleeder capsule here at the base of the overdrive apply piston. So I'm just situate it over here, and you're going to want to have a 5/32 drift, just like this. And it just fits right in there. And onto the ground it goes. And you see, I don't know if you could see this, but let me see if I can zoom in. There is a recess way down in there that will stop the new one. And then once it's installed, you'll stake it in place. It will be a little stubborn because there was previously a stake here from the previous rebuilder. Now I'm going to get a little bit bigger drift and finish it off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stake it, and then I'm going to tap it back out toward this end so it's flush against the the staked portion of the casting. You really don't want this thing popping out for obvious reasons. If it does, then you're going to have way too much fluid loss at this location, and you're going to have potential for slipping, flare shifting, etc. You may also have the opposite problem where there's too much fluid entering, and you're going to have a uncontrolled apply condition. All right, I think that's good. Sonics makes a Smart Tech drum that replaces the factory piece, It's not cheap. It's over $800 at most places, either online or local hard part supplier. So just be aware that you'll be spending some money, but if it's your transmission, it may be worth the investment. It has several upgrades and design features that make it a lot more desirable than the factory drum, especially if you're doing something high performance. All right. So with that taken care of, we can remove the O-ring and the lip seal. So here's the old O-ring, and then here's the old lip seal. Maybe the old lip seal will come out if I use the right tool. Okay, that one was stuck in there for some reason. Alright, let's install our new lip seal and O-ring. So it just goes right in there. Pretty straightforward deal. And then for the seal itself, this is going to be the lip seal portion. This will face down. So it's going to install just like this. Alright, spent a few minutes off camera cleaning out this drum a little bit. Spiffing it up. So if you're wondering why the old seal and O-ring was on, whenever I'm not super familiar with a given transmission, not done a ton of them, I will leave things like lip seals, sealing rings, O-rings in place through the cleaning cycle so that I know when I go back to replace them with the new parts, I can directly compare them, and there's very, very little risk of me actually putting the wrong lip seal in position. Not a huge concern with these, but there are some transmissions where you'll have very, very similar sized seals. Dimensions are very, very similar by eye. They may appear identical, but they're actually different, and they're materially different, meaning if you put the wrong, part or seal or whatever at a place where it shouldn't go, then you're going to have a major problem when the unit goes back in. So red and green. Okay, so sealing ring for the, or groove rather, for the green O-ring is right there. It's obvious, but it may not be obvious as to where the red one goes. It's going to go right here where my finger is. This is the snap ring groove. So it's going to go on the land or groove closest to the base. And get on there. And then lastly, your lip seal, which is recessed down in here. And like the other one, the lipped portion here, the sealing surface itself faces into the drum or the cavity. My battery's about to die, so let me actually swap it out, then we'll install the lip seal. So this one's going to be tricky. You have to get it right up in there. And there's actually not a lot of room to work despite how it appears. Just work it in. Got to make sure that as you're working it, you know, all the way around, the portion of the seal that you installed isn't trying to pop out on you. And that last little bit can be tough because the rest of it has to kind of spread out across the entirety of the groove, but it'll go in. Main thing is you don't want to force it. And just double check. Make sure there's no problems or issues. Make sure it's fully installed in that groove. So a good way to do that is to just take your thumb and kind of, you know, pull upward, if you will, on the lip itself, you know, on the very edge, and just seat it one final time. All right. So when it comes to, you know, multi-part complicated assemblies like this, the method that I like to use when it comes to reinstallation is what I call last off, first on, or last out, first in. So we technically just completed the disassembly of this whole deal by removing the old lip seals and O-rings, okay? So technically speaking, this entire complex had not gone through the disassembly process in its entirety until just now. So next thing we'll do is install the return plate assembly. You have a Belleville plate here. And it goes like this, and then you'll have your snap ring. So you can start to work it on the bench, and you should be able to install it, but there is going to be sizable spring tension. So, you know, if you need to go to the press to finish it off, that's fine. So just get it started in the groove. You know, you can take the plate, kind of sneak it underneath the snap ring just to get it going, and then start working everything all around. Like I said, it's going to fight you, but if you can get it started and get a good length of it going, then you may be able to finish it off on the bench. Okay, we have the drum with the return plate compressed here using the 3-leg compressor. So how you want to do this is have your snap ring such that you can get in behind the leg that's maybe closest to the drum like this, because otherwise it might interfere, and then just work the snap ring in all the way around. Okay, if you're wearing gloves like I am, you might get caught up, but you know, just be careful. Make sure it's fully seated, and then relax spring tension slowly. All right, any concerns about alignment or seating depth, you can correct on the bench with a hammer and a screwdriver. All right, now we're ready to put this whole thing back together. So what I like to do is pre-lubricate everything, all sealing surfaces, anywhere there's an O-ring or lip seal or what have you. And at that point, once everything's all pre-lubed, we literally start putting it all back together. So first you're going to have your lip seal down here at the base of the drum, and your O-ring as well. So just lube everything up. You know, get it nice and saturated with assembly lube. You don't want to skimp on the lube here. And I'm doing this in January, so you want to use more lube in the winter than you do in the summer. But like I said, you really can't use too much of this stuff. You can only use not enough. All right, here's our clutch housing. Lube all of the sealing surfaces in here. You lube the splines as well if you'd like. Okay, I can think of a really bad joke I can make right now when it comes to lube. I don't know if I should make it. If you're kind of thinking what I'm thinking, or you want to guess, go ahead and put it in the comments. You know, it's based on current events that are happening right now with one particular well-known hip-hop star and the trouble that he's in. So that should give you enough information to go on. Involves lube. So just lube everything, at least when it comes to transmission building. Okay, that's the topic of the video, transmission building and nothing else. And get that bushing. Okay, nice Durabond Teflon coated, or I don't know if it's Teflon coating, I think it's maybe, or graphite coating actually, I think. But whatever it is, it's silky smooth on journals. So this isn't the last time we're going to be reaching for the lube bucket, but I want to get everything kind of ready to go so that we can just move through the assembly process. And I'm constantly checking the camera angle just to make sure that I have you in the shot and that what I'm doing is being captured as it should. Last thing I want is to have a situation where I'm talking and I'm moving through the process and, you know, doing this, doing that, and you can't see a single thing. And I've shot videos like that before. You know, you're not going to see them because they've never been published, but that has happened to me. All right, so recall at the very beginning we talked about all the snap rings that are in this assembly. So we have pretty much all of them visible, and they're in their respective locations. So this is going to be the set for your overdrive clutch. Here are the two grooves for the snap rings for the underdrive clutch, and these were a pain in the ass. And then this is going to be the snap ring for the reverse clutch. Here are your return spring assembly snap rings, return spring, return plate, etc. So here's your spring assembly for the underdrive piston. And then you have two remaining snap rings. This little one here, I probably shouldn't have worn black gloves. This little one here is going to be for your drain back capsule. We still have to put the O-ring. And then this one is for the input shaft itself. So let's go ahead and take care of that little drain back capsule now. Get the O-ring on there, install it into the input shaft, and seat the snap ring. I may need that shop towel back over here because this little O-ring is a little bit hardened, so last thing I want to do is, like, you know, stab myself with the pick. I've done that all too often, all too many times, and it gets old real quick. Okay, this is the inboard side. This is the side that faces you. Get that over here. See, already reaching for the lube once again. So I could put a little bit of lube down there in the bore as well. And take this opportunity to coat the bushing with assembly lube. So if you're just starting building transmissions and you want to know kind of what supplies you should have on hand, I would recommend you use this blue stuff for general lubrication duties. So O-rings, sealing rings, lip seals, whatever, bushings, journals, etc. And then use this green stuff to hold bearings and thrust washers onto their respective parts. Get a little something or other to tap this in. There it goes. Yeah, you just want to make sure it's below the snap ring groove. Alright, now what we need to do is take the forward hub position over here where there's this hole in the bench that you can barely see. I'll reorient the camera so that we can begin the buildup of the entire rest of the assembly. Alright, just double check. Make sure everything's nice and lubed in there, because next thing we're going to do is install the input shaft. I mean, you could put the sealing rings on now if you want, but I don't know that I'd recommend it, just simply because you're going to be manipulating this thing all around, and who knows, you know, you might either displace or cut one of them, and that's the last thing you'd want. Alright, so this is a wire style snap ring. It's fairly easy to go on by hand. And when you go to assemble the case, notice this play here. So I'll just simulate it. Alright, you're going to feel a little bit of that when you do your front end play measurements. So you need to measure this. And net that movement out of your front end play, because what you're actually measuring is this entire assembly and its travel longitudinally against the back of the stator. Now, the selective thrust washer and the number 5 bearing is on the very back side of the assembly. Okay, so that's where you're going to make your adjustment. But incidentally, when I checked front end play just hastily by hand before I took the unit apart, honestly, it felt just like this. And you know, if you watch that video, you can see the details. But when I checked both front and rear end play, I couldn't actually discern either, other than this movement right here. So it's possible the case was assembled a little bit too tight, but we won't know until we get everything back together. Alright, I'm going to take out this snap ring for right now. This is going to be our reverse snap ring. Basically the last snap ring that goes into this assembly. And then we have for the underdrive clutch the 2 snap rings, and they are here. And then of course our overdrive snap rings, and they are there. So like I said, we're already revisiting the lube. get these two out of the way as well. All right, as we go through, I will call out the thicknesses of each snap ring so that you know which one we're working with, and you can kind of follow along in the ATSE manual where they have all of the snap ring thicknesses laid out for you. All right, so this is sealing surface here for the drum lip seal, and then the O-ring seals against this sealing surface. All right. Okay, we'll do air checks to make sure that nothing got cut on the way in, but that felt good. That's how these would typically feel when you're putting them back together. All right, now what we're going to do is mate it to our hub and input shaft assembly here. All right, now that you have the housing put together with the drum, just make sure your lugs are lined up, cut out the cutout for each respective part here, and then carefully drop it on in. You're gonna have to use body weight to get it to seat, but you should hear it and feel it once it's fully bottomed out, and the snap ring groove down here should be exposed. So I'm just double checking, but I think I'm good. So this is the snap ring that's going to go in first. So the beveled side, it's a concave bevel, it like feeds inward, it's going to face you. I'm going to get my pliers. It doesn't really matter where it goes as far as the eye loops, and the pliers are not set up correctly. So these snap-on pliers are like, they're barely big enough to deal with this thing. And I'll give you the tool number in a second. It's SRPC 9000A. There you go. Almost there, not quite. All right. Just double check it all the way around, make sure it's fully seated. Yeah, obviously I don't want any problems. Okay, now we're ready for the underdrive clutch applying balance piston. So let me do the apply piston first. Yeah, I know. It's already freaking coated with assembly lube. How much more assembly lube do you think it really needs? I get a lot of questions about where I get these, kind of blade style lip seal tools. Witt Performance Transmissions does sell them. I think they're like a couple bucks a piece. So if you get your parts from there, just you know, tack on a couple of these. And if you buy enough stuff from them, it's possible that they may just throw one or two in. I mean, I've purchased rebuild kits from them before, and you know, they would literally just throw you one or two of these lip seal tools in with the package, and you know, you're good to go. And you can use the loop style tool as well. That's fine. I mean, whatever you ultimately want to use, doesn't really matter. So this one's fighting me. I mean, that's fine. That tells you that the piston is going to seal very well. I'm also kind of letting up on my pressure, and I shouldn't be. Took a little more effort than I really wanted to, or what I was anticipating, but it's in there. Alright, and you got your return spring assembly. Just stick it right there. And then your balance piston. So what you want to do is kind of get it squared up, you know, as square as you can get it prior to going to the press. So you can, I mean, if you're really strong, you can install this on the bench. I'm not going to take the chance because I don't believe I'm strong enough, number one, and number two, knowing my luck, I will find a way to tear the lip seal on it. So I'm going to go to the press, we'll get it started, and then fully install it and install the snap ring. Just get the snap ring groove fully exposed so that you can install the snap ring. I mean, that's basically it. Check it all the way around. Make sure it's not bound up. Make sure it's not sticking out part of the groove. All right, I think we're good. All right, let's go back to the bench. We'll take a look at it there. All right, I repositioned the snap ring a little bit off camera just so the two eye loops, if you will, are in this notch. I don't know if that matters, but it's probably more of my own OCD than anything else. All right, so let's grab up our underdrive clutch pack. So this is a Chrysler nomenclature. Underdrive for these transmissions is going to be your forward clutch for the Ford 6R80s and 1, 2, 3, 4 clutch equivalent, roughly speaking, for the GM 6L. So you're going to have two snap rings here for this clutch. You're going to have this flat snap ring that's going to go in after the clutch pack itself is installed, and then you're going to have a beveled snap ring that's going to go in after the backing plate's installed. So the flat snap ring measures, looks like 60 and 62 thousandths of an inch. And the beveled snap ring, which I've indexed this so that the paint marks are on the flat side and thus will face down, that's 95 thousandths of an inch thick. So for your backing plate itself, when you go to install it, you'll have a dot. This dot will face out, and the bigger of the two steps, which is this half here, starting with the lugs and everything to the right, is going to face into the clutch basket, facing the clutch pack. Okay, so these frictions are a combination of interior exterior. They are 57 thousandths of an inch thick, so that's how you can tell them apart from your overdrive clutch. Those frictions and steels, or well, you know, single-sided friction steel plates, are 52 thousandths thick. So you're always going to start with a exterior notched plate on the bottom. All right, and then an interior plate, and so on and so forth, until you run out of them. So it should be 6 and 6 in this clutch pack. So you have the two snap ring grooves. Your flat snap ring will go in first. Alright, this top plate, you know, will be loose, it'll be free. Now you're going to have your backing plate. So I'm actually going to clean this up a little bit. You can take like either 400 grit sandpaper or wafer pad, but the surface is real glazed because the overdrive clutch burned, but the other side's perfectly fine. So this just needs a little bit of prep work, and then once I'm done with that, we'll resume. It's a little bit better. So the big step is going to face down into the drum, and the side that I just prepped is going to face up. You can see a dot as well. So 31 to 63 thousandths is going to be what you want to shoot for when it comes to clearance. And you can absolutely measure this clearance with feeler gauges, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start on the low end with 31 thou. Well, 30 thousandths. And it looks like my feeler gauges are a little bit too wide. So what I have to do is actually mount a dial indicator. And first we're going to install the snap ring. Now again, flat side faces down. This snap ring is kind of a pain because it is very, very thick, very tough, and getting it out is always a chore. Just watch your hands. It'll snap right in. As far as I know, there's no clocking requirement, so I just have the end straddling a little dot there. So what I want to try to do is work the clutch. So that's going to require me to bring the pump over and apply air into the clutch feed there and see what we can get as far as actuation is concerned, and then I'll mount a dial indicator to one of those teeth and see if we can measure clearance using that method. I'm installing the old sealing rings just because I don't want to take a risk and breaking one of the new ones, but it'll allow us to at least test the drum and get things like clearance measurements so that we can know whether or not we're either in or outside of spec. Alright, got old sealing rings, old pump. So carefully install, and we'll go ahead and apply some air. Alright, now what I'm going to do is mount a dial indicator so that we can measure clearance. Basically, I have to put the plunger on one of these teeth, this top friction here with the interior teeth. Okay, dial indicator set up. It's on the top friction's inner tooth, or that interior friction, and so we have two different clearance ranges that we're working with, at least in the literature that we have available to us, and the Transgo instructions. They give you a range of 30 to 63 thousandths, whereas the ATSG manual is giving us 40 to 68 thousandths. So as long as you're somewhere within those extremes, you should be fine. So let's see what we have. Looks like 55 thou. Not quite returning to zero, so there we go. Let's try it again. At 54 thou. 53, 54 thou. Alright. So what I would recommend if you're going to use this method is actually measure at 4 points and average that number. So let's turn the drum around. I'm going to make a mark so I don't lose track of exactly where I put the indicator initially. So it's going to be like right here. And I'm just going to go 180 just for the sake of time. I'll measure the other two positions off camera. Alright, and you want to make sure you're on the tooth itself. You don't want the plunger on any part of the friction material because that's obviously going to throw off your reading if you are. It's like 52, 53, and that's returning to zero. That was pretty consistent. That was a horrible 3. Made it even worse. All right, let me measure the other two positions and then we'll come back with the actual average. All right, so let's take our average. We have two measurements of 54 thou, one of 58 and one of 51. 0.58 plus 0.051 plus 0.054 plus 0.054 equals that divided by 4 gives us a clearance of 54 thousandths. So, round down. I know I'll get asked this and I keep forgetting to mention it, but when you're checking drums, through the pump, you want to use between 50 and 75 psi. You can use as little as 30 psi, though depending on what unit you're working with, you may or may not get full actuation. I think I have about 75 psi on the regulator at the moment. So let's go ahead and install the overdrive clutch. So if you notice here on the overdrive clutch, it's marked OD, and as I mentioned earlier, I think those frictions for the underdrive are 57 thousandths of an inch thick, whereas the overdrive clutch, these frictions are 52 thousandths, and that's the interior and exterior frictions, does not matter. So 6 and 6 is the factory stack up, but we're going to go 7 and 7. And I do not soak my frictions, I do soak my bands. Obviously this transmission don't have no bands, but if you're wondering why I don't, I do have a video on the subject that you can watch if you'd like. I think it's called something like Rebuilding Automatic Transmissions, Why I Do Not Soak My Frictions. Long story short, I like to spin the shafts once the case is fully assembled, and I want to feel if there's anything unusual going on, any binding, anything that's wonky, doesn't feel right. And you're never going to know if you have a problem, or at least the likelihood is a lot lower as to whether or not you'll be able to identify a problem with a given transmission once it's all assembled, if all the clutches are soaked, because they're going to absorb all that fluid, adhere to the steels, and it's going to be a lot harder to turn the shafts than it would otherwise be when everything's dry. So I do like to soak the planets, in whatever transmission fluid that the unit takes. In this case, ATF4. So when I, get to the point where we're doing planet assembly, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to soak them and then assemble it, and then we'll stick it to the side like on a tray or something, so it doesn't make a huge mess. All right. So the dished portion here, this faces down, and then this faces U. Oops. Gotta line it up with the lugs in the case, or in the housing. Duh. Alright, so just want to double check that. So you have two snap rings that are going here. You're going to have one at the bottom, and then one at the top. And that's these two right here. One is waved. I didn't mention this in the teardown video, but there is a waved snap ring, and then there is a flat snap ring. This is the waved snap ring. You can see the wave, the kind of undulations, and then this is the flat snap ring. So the waved snap ring is 60 thousandths of an inch thick. And the flat snap ring looks like it's coming in at 61 thou, so these are very similar in terms of their thickness. Alright, so wave snap ring goes in first. I'm going to stick it all the way into the bottom, just like this. And as far as your clocking is concerned, again, I don't think it's super critical. Just want to make sure it's fully seated, that's all. I mean, it's never going to be fully seated. Obviously, it's not flat. Dish faces down. Now your flat snap ring. Now I'm just going to be anal and stick this end right here, literally in the middle of this particular lug. Yep. There we go. So the function of the wavy snap ring and I guess the flat snap ring too is to kind of keep the two backing plates away from the clutch pack while the overdrive clutch is not working. So this works in combination with the pressure balance system that's programmed into the transmission's command and control logic to I guess dynamically control and prevent centrifugal apply or clutch drag when the OD clutch is not being commanded on and working. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and check clutch apply. So for your overdrive, you want to put air here. That's solid. Okay, everything's good. And the other thing you want to do is when you're charging the circuit, try to grab up on the frictions. If you can move them while you're charging the circuit like that, that's a problem. So I gotta actually, prevent this thing from wanting to tip. Alright, that's holding rock solid. I can't move it, so we appear to be in good shape here. Alright, now we can measure the clearance, and for this it's best to use feeler gauges. It's the easiest method to do it. And all you're really going to do is just stick feeler gauges between the top friction and the bottom of the backing plate. And it's pretty simple. So the overdrive clearance that Transgo specifies is 40 to 63 thousandths. That's your range. In the ATSG manual, the range that they give you is going to be 30 to 63 thousandths. So the reason that Transgo's bottom end is a little bit, a little bit greater than the ATSG manual is simply because you're adding one more friction in steel. So when you add more frictions to a pack, you open up that minimal clearance because again you're trying to prevent clutch drag. So I got 41 thousandths here on these two feeler gauges. And where you want to measure this is on the wide lug of the clutch, the friction disc. Okay. Do the best you can to avoid the channels if you have real thin feeler gauges. Alright, so 41 is, it's obviously a lot more than that. So let's go right to the high end to 63 thou, 20, 21, and 22 and see what we have. Okay, I can't fit that in there. Oh, okay, now I can, but takes a little bit of effort to do it. So I imagine we're at the higher end of clearance, which is fine. The other thing too to consider is because I'm measuring dry, when you put this back in and these frictions absorb all that fluid, the clearance will tighten up a little bit. But then again, when you put it to work, the clearance may relax a little. So we're not wildly outside of the spec range. We're just simply at the very top of what both the ATSG manual and Transgo tells you you should be at. And the ATSG manual, they're thinking you're only working with 6 interior and 6 exterior frictions, a total of 12. We have 14 in here. Alright, now we're ready for some hubs. So we're going to go ahead and install the underdrive and overdrive clutch hub, as well as install the bearings that go to them. So they've been soaking in ATF 4 plus fluid, or ATF plus 4 rather. Don't use Deck 6 or Mercon or anything like that. You just want to use what Chrysler specifies. So when this fluid is new, it has almost like a medicine-y quality smell to it, which is interesting. But either way, We got 5 total bearings that need to go into this assembly or onto it. So we have our new bushings in here. I already lubed them up. I'm going to lube them again. And then we have a bearing that has to go right here. And then we have another spot for a bearing. So as I mentioned in the, I don't know if it was this video or the first one of this series, but these bearings, or the bearings I should say, that came out of the transmission, there's nothing really wrong with them. I was just thinking they were going to be overheated, so I thought it best to just grab a bearing kit. I mean, if you want to be super thorough in your overhauls, it's a good idea to replace the pre-existing Torrington bearings and roller bearing with all new counterparts, but it's not strictly speaking mandatory. I mean, these bearings are not any different than, bearings in any other transmission. And I mean, if you're in the industry, you built transmissions before, you know that you can certainly reuse the bearings, as long as there wasn't a major overheating episode or total, catastrophic failure, grenade job, where, fine bits of metal are floating around. I mean, the test is really, is the bearing making noise? If it's not making any noise and it's, feels nice and smooth as you're, working it in your hands, and chances are you do not need to replace that particular bearing. Alright, so grab some green assembly lube, and you can put it right here. I have blue assembly lube already there. And then just take your first bearing. It's just going to sit in just like this. Alright, so you're going to have to get it past all of the overdrive clutches, and then splined onto the underdrive clutch, all of them. I could feel, like, as I'm rotating it in, I can feel it being hung up on clutches. So, and you can also go like this with it. If it's rocking from side to side like that, it's not fully seated. Alright, I think I am 100% engaged on all of the frictions. I won't say steels, there's no steels in there. And it's spinning nice and smooth. Oh, there we go. We had one more clutch to negotiate. Okay, next bearing. Just like that. Lube up your bushings. Okay, that's not nearly as, I don't want to say difficult, but it goes a lot quicker. Alright, now grab the reverse clutch hub. You can get you some assembly lube. Now bearing. Alright, then your reverse clutch. This is a pretty simple and basic clutch. 2 frictions and a single steel. 1 steel only. So new steel module. So the second clutch and fourth clutch will get new steels, and this is a new steel. Alright, now our backing plate. Now these backing plates go on kind of tough, and what you need to do is, once you install this thing, you install the snap ring over top of it, and then we got to take a screwdriver and literally pry up on the backing plate to free it from the clutch pack, so it's hard and fast against the snap ring. So get it on square to the extent you can. And you may have to take a hammer handle and just persuade it on. I mean, you don't need to be gorilla with it. You just need to get the snap ring groove exposed. So you go all the way down with it. The clutch will be down more than likely. So this snap ring is the last of the multitude of snap rings. The 8 of them that went into this thing, and it's 61 thousandths of an inch thick, and it is a flat snap ring. Yep. There we go. So as you can see, the snap ring and the backing plate are not like against each other. So you just want to pry up on the backing plate until it's right up against that snap ring. Kind of an unusual design. Okay. This way, the hub should rotate freely, the clutch pack should move as it should. Alright, last thing we want to do with this drum, as far as mechanical, is just verify that the reverse clutch works. So go ahead, put air. I turned off my compressor because I don't want it coming on, so it has been leaking down. I think I'm about 35 to 40 psi, maybe 50 at most. Okay, you should not be able to move this hub when you're charging the circuit with air. It's going to have a little bit of wiggle or a little bit of play, but that's it. Alright, and I'll annotate the video so you already know about this, but I want to make sure I verbally mention it. I had one extra bearing. So this assembly only takes 5 total bearings, or there's only 5 total bearings associated with it, where a bearing is making contact with one or more components in this input clutch housing deal. So this bearing goes between the stator and the other side of this, input shaft, and then this is our number 5 bearing, which snaps into the selective thrust washer. Alright, so we have our 97 thou thick washer, and then I have another one on the bench. I measured this, it's 93 thou thick. I'm actually going to go with this one because, like I said, I could not feel any perceivable amount of end play. So let's see, this washer itself doesn't have any kind of locking tabs. It's going to be on the bearing right here, and it's just going to snap in. There's another one there. And that's basically it. And it lives right here. So this is going to go on the bench. I'm not going to install it onto this thing now. It'll be part of the final assembly process. And then you have one bearing here that we'll use for the pump, and then we got an extra one. All right. So that is the input clutch housing assembly. Kind of extensive, is what it is. Just gonna grab up on it. Not bad for old ceiling rings. One thing I did notice when I was messing around with this off camera, when you take this in and out, sometimes these ceiling rings can become dislodged. If you don't check it or catch it, and you go try to reinstall the pump or whatever, maybe you're trying to adjust for end play, you'll break one of the rings. So always check these ceiling rings on the stator as you're messing around with it. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and move on to the 2/4 clutch housing, reverse housing, meaning low reverse, and the gear train, and that'll be it for sub-assembly. So thanks so much for watching, greatly appreciate it. If you want to continue with the build, check it out. It'll be part 3 of this series, and that'll be that.